But how about investor, the investor part of the side? So how about investor leads, Istvan? What do you think is the best way?
Yeah, I think just before I address that, I think there's a few things that I would probably add to the deal side of it as well. So properties, I think, there's Rightmove and Zoopla you mentioned. I think, yes, they are the very obvious ones, but there's quite a lot of other sources, sort of online sources out there as well. So things like Open Rent, for example, a lot of people may not be familiar with, but, that's a reasonably newish platform for people to advertise their houses. And now it's not just for landlords who want to let their houses out, but it's also for people to sell their houses out. So that's another platform I think that's worth considering as well. But look, there's loads out there. I mean, you could probably put two A4 sheets together in terms of how many different websites you could go onto. But I think the importance of that is that there's online and offline, and I think you need to consider both because yes, we live in a digital age, and yes, most people are online and most people are using Facebook, etc. But there are still, a good part of the population that are not online or not as frequently online as the younger generation. So, you want to be capturing both, really. I think is probably what my sort of to add into this. But in terms of investors, I think quite similar to what you mentioned, really, to be honest, because you still end up in this online and offline sort of, split between the two. So in terms of online, so I know a lot of people, and we've had a very good guest on our talk show last week. We had Laura Muse here, who has done amazingly well out of using social media for attracting investors and investor funds. So if you remember a conversation with her, she was saying that her ability to raise funds come through Facebook. So she put herself out there in certain groups and attracted a large amount of investment through there. So I think you mentioned Facebook groups. Facebook groups are brilliant for attracting investors as well. So there are a number of groups out there where there's tens of thousands of people in there. And they are not just people in there who want to know about property and want to learn property and want to do the projects. There are people in those groups who are just quite happy to invest the money with the people who actually want to do the hard yards of property. So if you want to find investors, that is still the same sort of group that you should and could be using for the same target market. So also you can use your personal profile, and I think it's one of those things that some people overlook. And I was one of those initially. I thought, I don't know any of my friends who got money or want to be investing. But the thing is, you don't know these things. You don't know the personal circumstances of every single one of your friends. They may be thinking at home, look, I've got loads of money in the bank, or maybe I've got some money in the bank. The bank is giving me next to nothing as a return on my money in the bank because interest rates are so low. So those people seeing you doing stuff, doing projects of certain type, they may be thinking, oh, maybe I want a piece of that. Maybe I want a little bit better return on my money. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out on your personal profile as well, because that could be very useful. And you can also create yourself on Facebook, your own page. And again, it's another way to market yourself essentially freely, because even on your page, you get a bit of an organic reach to certain people. You invite people to like your page, and then you can put out content in your page, which people can view it, and they get notifications. And then you can also use that page to do paid advertising to those people. So which again can be very effective if you do it the right way. So if you build yourself a big enough audience, and you can start and targeting those people, with your paid ads, it could be very useful. So those are the few things from Facebook perspective. But I think you mentioned Instagram as well. So Instagram is a slightly different platform. I personally have an account. I don't use it as much as I should do. I'm still getting my head around, I think, there's very much of a visual platform, pictures and videos, not so much text-based. You can do the more text sort of content in Facebook, for example. So yeah, Instagram is more visual. But again, it appeals to a different segment of the market. So if you think about slightly younger audience who, all about taking pictures and videos, it's all about smartphones, maybe they are your audience. So then that's the platform you should use. And you also got the others like LinkedIn and Twitter. So LinkedIn is, again, very different audience, much more sort of professional. You know, people used to use LinkedIn for having it as the online CV, essentially, for their next jobs, next career moves. I think it evolved into something much bigger now. People use it for advertising a lot more. People grow their connections on LinkedIn and actually marketing directly to those people. So it's a very different platform, and it's also very powerful. A lot of people use it quite effectively now. So that's another good one. And then there's Twitter, which I'm not on. I don't really understand Twitter. I see people do talk about Twitter, and maybe just not for not for my generation. I'm not sure. I mean, I know people use it, but like I say, it doesn't really make much sense to me. Maybe it does. Maybe there's a good advertising platform as well, and I need to discover it a bit more. So I don't know if you use Twitter, Peter.
No, I don't. I am on it, but apart from the general content marketing, which my VA does, don't really tweet or post there. So
yeah, like I said, it seems to have certain industries seem to use quite well. You know, like things like Twitter. I know that journalists, for example, you know, when it comes to sport journalists, for example, you see them sort of, you know, doing, you know, very short, sort of snappy messages, and that seems to go all over the world. But, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe it works for property as well. I don't know. Like I say, I might need to just have a look and have a good sort of test, see if it actually does anything, and maybe open an account myself and start using it. So
yeah,
but that's really, I guess, from an online perspective, I think that's really what I've got really on this one. And I think, yes, you probably can do the offline side of things in terms of attracting investors. You know, there's the good old networking events that I think a lot of people either like or dislike. You know, it just kind of depends on your personality. You know, do you like meeting people face to face? Do you not? Are you comfortable with getting out there and, you know, being in a room with 50 odd people and, you know, sort of working the crowd? You know, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think that's still a very good way of actually finding people who want to invest with you. So I still think that the face-to-face interaction is quite necessary. I know we got these calls you can do nowadays, you know, Zoom or Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever else, but I think the face-to-face interaction is still very important, especially when people you know, give you their money to give them a good return. I think the trust element still has to be there, and I think that requires quite a few touch points. I think there's certain theories around how many touch points you got to have. When I say touch points, I mean like meetings, you know, like how many times you met a person before you trust them, you know, and it's different for everybody. You know, some people are quite comfortable with meeting the person and you know, giving them a key to the house. I think you and I spoke about it just today, that, you know, you've had an instance when someone's giving you a key to the house after the first phone call. Yeah, and that's probably quite unusual, right? But, you know, that happens. But I guess most people, especially when it comes to potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds, I think you're talking potentially meeting either, you know, via Facebook or WhatsApp or Zoom or something similar a few times, and a few meetings, a couple of coffees, maybe a lunch or something similar before you get to the point where they actually, you know, sign a piece of paper and essentially become partners in some shape or form. So, but I think those are really good still. So meeting people at networking events and all sorts of different places, clubs, you know, you can meet them at clubs as well, golf clubs or whatever other clubs you belong to. So those are the sort of what I call offline, you know, because you don't need to have a Facebook account to go to a networking event. That's not a criteria, but you can still turn up and still have a good conversation with someone. So those would be probably the few that I would say are quite useful. So,